Blue Velvet, directed by David Lynch, came out in 1986 and stars Kyle MacLachlan and Dennis Hopper. David Lynch is one of those strange surrealist directors. His films compose, in my view, quite a broad spectrum of weirdness, I think we'll call it. So at the far end of the spectrum, you've got films like Eraserhead, Mulholland Drive, Inland Empire, which are all really sort of abstract. They don't really have conventional plots, and it's really just open to interpretation. At the other end of the spectrum, he has done some films that are more mainstream, more accessible to your average sort of audience that do follow conventional plots. So he did films like The Elephant Man, The Straight Story. Twin Peaks seems to fall into that category, even though I think it's more surrealist. Twin Peaks, the TV show, did seem to resonate with a wider audience. Blue Velvet falls right in the middle of that spectrum for me. It's not too weird. It does have a conventional plot. You can watch this without any reference to the sort of the allegories or the themes that are going on. You can watch it just as a straight up mystery thriller. However, for me watching it, there are a lot of those things in the background that are constantly grabbing my attention. So I think it's definitely one of the most accessible of David Lynch's films because it does have that plot structure. However, it is a hook into some of his more weird, surrealist styles of filmmaking. It's a film that's always fascinated me, Blue Velvet. David Lynch likes to say, he said it very often, that he views his films as dreams. You know, his ideas for films, his ideas for scenes come to him in his dreams, and he tries to give that style in the films that are produced. And I think that's quite fascinating. I think obviously there are excesses to it, because some of his films, I mean, I don't want to review all of his films, but some of his films I feel go too far in the surrealist direction. I think for me, I mean, I love films with themes. I love films with allegories like Blue Velvet. But for me, there always has to be, I think what keeps it anchored is the plot and is the story. The classic example of an allegory, of how to do an allegory well, is Animal Farm. The George Orwell novel, which, the story's about, a society of pigs, a society of farm animals, deciding they don't like their leaders. And obviously, the allegory was the Russian Revolution and the Bolsheviks and things like that. But you can read that story just as it is on paper. It's really only if you want to look into it deeper that you see the allegories. And I think when you lose the conventional story, for me, it falls apart, and I don't really rate it very much. So I think Blue Velvet is the perfect mixture. It works very well on its superficial level, and it works very well on its deeper level. I think that's why I wanted to talk. It's a film that I really like. It's a film that I was really keen to talk about. So the plot of the film, on the surface, it follows Jeffrey, played by Kyle MacLachlan, who he's a young guy, and he gets embroiled in this sort of detective mystery story. He lives in an idyllic sort of American town, picket fences, suburbia, all of that. But beneath the surface, there's this like seedy underbelly, which is sort of epitomised in the film by Dennis Hopper's character, Frank, who's one of the most sort of, for a David Lynch film, he did quite well to produce probably one of cinema's most iconic and recognisable and sort of formidable villains. Frank in this film is a really disturbing depiction. It's a really disturbing character, and it's really the role that I think made Dennis Hopper. It's his greatest performance, and I think even in his own view, this was the role that he felt he was born to play. And it is just such a terrifying, genuine performance. So you've got the detective story in the film, discovering the mystery of what's going on. But you've also got that thematic level, and I think for me the theme of the film is mostly to do with the duality of light and dark. Okay, so you've got, I mean, it starts off really sort of encapsulating. It starts as it means to go on, basically. So the film opens with a scene of suburbia, bright colours. All the gardens are well manicured. You've got children playing and people waving from cars and all of that sort of stuff. Um, bright sunlight, but then it goes underneath the surface. It goes beneath the grass, and you got all these sort of like beetles and insects and horrible things, and it's like, okay, we've got it. This is going to be a film about the light and the dark, the good things and the bad things, and it captures that quite brilliantly and quite intelligently. I mean, I feel almost that opening scene's a bit too on the nose. Maybe they could have done without that, but it sets the tone for the film, and it's how best I think to introduce a discussion of the themes. It's a I think it's a perfectly balanced film in terms of the light and the dark, just as a lot of what happens in the film, the way it's presented is. The town itself is divided. The town in the film is divided into the suburban school, nice parts, and then you've got the seedy underbelly part that's all brought to life through cinematography and through lighting and through music, and it's really really well executed. Um, and I think what sells it for me actually in a lot of ways is Kyle MacLachlan's performance as Jeffrey. He plays this young man. It's a coming of age story, sort of. He starts the story as he's quite naive. He's just very curious about everything that's going on, and that's how he gets dragged into this mystery plot. But he matures. He sees things that really sort of changes his perspective on life, and his performance quite kind of carries it. And I think it's a performance that's easy to dismiss because some of the dialogue is like purposefully cheesy. The romance that he sort of develops with Laura Dern's character is purposefully sort of cornball. Some of the dialogue that they come out with it's like pure David Lynch, but it's to sell this sort of idyllic surface level to the world of this town. It is all quite cheesy. It is all quite light and quite phony almost, but he really does carry the story. You've got that coming of age element to it. You've also got a bit of corruption of innocence as well. I think for him and also for Laura Dern's character. I mean, she's portrayed as his light, if you will, in the film. She is the if he is the light in the dark, she is very much the light for him. Whereas Dennis Hopper and Isabella Rossellini and all of those the characters portrayed by them are all the dark side of him. And I think that's very very good. It's very interesting performance. He's a very underrated actor, I think. And then, of course, I talked about Dennis Hopper's performance earlier. I mean, he is truly terrifying in this film. And it's curious, really, to me that this film, by David Lynch, has such recognisable characters, even to people that probably wouldn't have any time for a standard David Lynch film. And I think part of it is Dennis Hopper. It's just I mean, he steals the film really in a lot of ways by his performance. I don't think he's even on screen very often, but it's so iconic. It's so genuinely sort of suspenseful and tense when you're watching those scenes with him when he's interacting with Jeffrey. It's so tense. He brings such an unpredictability to it as well, and I think it's just really really well done. When the film was released in 1986, a lot of criticism was levelled at the film. I mean, it was a film that was quite panned, actually, when it was released, but one of the main targets for dislike was the treatment of Isabella Rossellini. I mean, her character in the film gets, some very bad things happen to her, and some people were uncomfortable with the way that she as the actress was treated, and I can understand that. I mean, it's such a sad performance. It's a really, really tragic character. What happens to her in the film. but she portrays it brilliantly. She's a very, very talented actress, and she really is. She really is one of the standouts in what is already a very, very good film. Um, the cinematography is quite it's good, but it's not conventionally good. I thought when I was watching it, a lot of it felt it felt quite TV like, which is strange because David Lynch had done films before, but Blue Velvet I think feels like a very well produced TV show in a way that a lot of it is shot. And I don't know if that's maybe just the prints of it that I've seen. I'll get into that in a second, but I've always felt it felt quite TV like, and I don't know if that's maybe just to help sell the suburbia elements of the tone. You know, you want that light tone, and maybe TV style would work better for that. I don't know. I'm not saying it to disparage the film. It's its own style, and the cinematography is quite vivid. I think when they compare the two halves of the town, essentially, you know, the seedy underbelly and the suburbia school kind of area. So it's a good cinematography. I've always been intrigued by the fact that they shot parts of it quite, I would say, simplistically. And on that note, I mean, I'm praising the cinematography. I watched the Netflix version of Blue Velvet compared to the old DVD that I had of it. It must be like 20 years old now. Like the DVD itself, I didn't buy it 20 years ago, but the DVD the transfer's 20 years old. That transfer was terrible. Like, I mean, when I watched that DVD a few years ago, the nighttime scenes, you can hardly tell what's going on. It was just a really bad print. I don't know. I think that was just something in the UK actually, but seeing it on Netflix brings out a lot more that I didn't see before. Brings out the films it's supposed to be seen, and I think it is an exceptionally well shot film. Actually, thinking about it just now, actually the nighttime scenes are shot far better than the daytime scenes. I think. I don't know if that's just because nighttime kind of conceals the quality a little bit. I'm not sure, but it is a good looking film. I'm not just saying this to disparage the cinematography. And the sound design's quite creepy as well. I noticed this. There's some audio synchronization issues which aren't too bothersome. I guess that's more just a technical matter, but some of the sound design, especially early on in the film, is just impeccable. They really deserve a lot of plaudits for that. And the music. The music is strange because it varies so much throughout the film. It varies from, you've got the opening music, which is very orchestral, and they use that sparingly throughout the film. You've got that orchestral, sort of traditional film noir soundtrack, but you've also got like sort of a jazzy soap opera type soundtrack that again kind of contributes to the TV feel of it. There's music that plays during some of the sort of happier scenes in the film. It's more like it's like a hymn almost. It's very sort of ethereal, and I guess it's all a bit of an odd mix. I mean, I can only imagine it coming out of the mind of David Lynch to mix it all together. But I think ultimately this film's strength lies in the fact that it's simple. It's a simple enough story. The characters are fairly simple in their motivations, but it really does capture something profound. In my view, it's a very emotional movie. I mean, when I watched this for the first time, I got really invested in it. I remember it was a film that I thought about for a long time afterwards, and I couldn't quite work out why. And I think it's really just the film is very, very thematic. It's deeply euphoric in the way that it focuses on scenes, in the way that it focuses on characters and emotions that they're feeling, emotional states that they're in. And I think it's a bit of an emotional roller coaster, really, because you go from the euphoric heights of certain scenes, of Jeffrey discovering the world, to the really, really dark, tense scenes with Dennis Hopper. That's really cinematic and really, really disturbing in some ways, and also really just fascinating and engrossing to watch. I will comment on I watched the version. I watched the deleted scenes that they found a few years ago. These scenes that they thought were lost for like a few decades, but they found them. They sort of flesh out Jeffrey's backstory and they add certain things. I kind of wish I hadn't seen them, to be honest, because they're well. I mean, they're well put together, but they add, for me, a lot of the. They show scenes of like Jeffrey at college at the beginning of the film, and for me, that kind of ruined a bit of the intrigue about his character. I would say just go in, if you're seeing it for the first time, just go in dark. Don't look up anything about the deleted scenes, because for me it just seemed a bit superfluous. I don't really. I mean, one or two scenes were good to flesh things out, but also they introduced Laura Dern's character earlier in the film with the deleted scenes, which I think is bad, because her introduction is one of the more important parts of the film. Um, so I would say don't really try and look out these deleted scenes unless you've seen the film and you're interested. But overall, Blue Velvet is simple yet profound. I think it's David Lynch's masterpiece. It's a film that I return to every now and then. It's this very emotional film. It's very atmospheric. Great performances, great themes, tremendous filmmaking. It's David Lynch at his best, and as a rating, I'm going to give it a highly respectable 90 out of 100. I highly recommend it.